The words tumbled from Cordelia's lips like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the candlelit cabin. She hadn't meant to say it, not like that. Not so bluntly, but Kestrel's gentle touch on her wrist had somehow unlocked the secret she'd carried for 3 torturous years. "I'm not a virgin," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. Instead of pulling away in disgust as she'd feared, Kestrel simply took her hand and smiled, a slow, understanding smile that reached his dark eyes and made her heart skip like a stone across water. "Does that change how you see me?" she asked, her green eyes searching his weathered face for any sign of judgment. Kestrel, whose Apache name meant one who soars above, had been watching this flame-haired woman for months from the edges of Millbrook Village. She was different from the other settlers, unafraid to venture beyond the safe boundaries, unashamed to speak with the native traders when others crossed the street. Now, sitting in his hidden cabin deep in the pine woods, he understood why she carried herself with such careful strength. "Your past does not diminish your worth, Cordelia," he said in his precise English, each word carefully chosen. "A flower that has known one garden is no less beautiful in another." She laughed shakily, a sound caught between relief and disbelief. "The people in town wouldn't see it that way. Reverend Clemens preaches that women like me are damaged goods." Kestrel's jaw tightened at the phrase. He'd seen how the narrow-minded villagers treated those who didn't fit their rigid molds. Reverend Clemens has never known hunger or loss or the weight of survival. His words carry no truth about who you are. 3 hours earlier, Cordelia had been fleeing through the forest, her torn dress catching on branches as she ran from another of Mayor Fitzpatrick's private meetings. The lecherous old man had cornered her again in his office, promising her the teaching position she desperately needed in exchange for favors she would never give. Her refusal had cost her the job and possibly her future in Millbrook. That's when she'd literally run into Kestrel on the forest path. He'd been returning from checking his trap lines, moving silent as smoke between the trees. The collision had sent them both tumbling, and when she'd looked up into his face-high cheekbones, skin like burnished copper, eyes dark as midnight, she'd felt something shift inside her chest. "You're bleeding," he'd said simply, noting the scratch on her cheek. "I'm fine," she'd lied, but her voice broke on the words. He hadn't pressed for explanations, just guided her to his cabin and tended her wound with gentle efficiency. It was his kindness that had undone her, the way he'd heated water for tea, the way he'd offered her his own blanket when she shivered, the way he'd waited patiently for her to speak. Now, in the warm glow of his fireplace, Cordelia felt more at peace than she had in years. "Why aren't you shocked? Most men would be." "I am not most men," Kestrel replied, his thumb tracing across her knuckles. "And I know what it means to carry shame that isn't yours to bear." She studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his black hair caught the firelight, the intricate beadwork on his leather vest that spoke of a culture she barely understood. "What shame do you carry?" "The white soldiers killed my wife and daughter 2 winters ago," he said quietly. "They called it a misunderstanding when our village complained. I carry the shame of being unable to protect them, though I know the fault was never mine." Cordelia's heart clenched. Without thinking, she reached up to touch his cheek. "I'm so sorry. As I am sorry for whatever man took your innocence without your willing heart," he said, leaning into her touch. "But that does not define you, any more than my loss defines me." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin windows, and reminding them both that the world beyond these walls was harsh and unforgiving. But inside, something fragile and precious was beginning to bloom. Dawn crept through the cabin windows like a cautious deer, and Cordelia woke to find herself curled on Kestrel's couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of sage and wood smoke. He sat across the room, already dressed, carving something small and intricate from a piece of pine. "You stayed," she said, surprised by the relief in her own voice. "Where else would I go? This is my home." His smile was teasing, but gentle. "Did you think I would flee into the forest because you trusted me with your truth?" She sat up suddenly, self-conscious about her wrinkled dress and tangled hair. In the harsh light of morning, the intimacy of the previous night felt almost dreamlike. "I should return to town before they miss their fallen woman?" Kestrel's voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. "Tell me about the man." "Who hurt you, Cordelia?" Her hand stilled on the blanket. She'd never spoken his name aloud, not once in 3 years. "His name was Beauregard Hawthorne. He was my stepfather." The carving knife paused in Kestrel's hands. When he looked up, she saw something dangerous flicker in his dark eyes, a glimpse of the warrior beneath the gentle exterior. "I was 15 when my mother married him," she continued, the words coming easier now. "She died of consumption the following winter, and I was alone with him in that big house on Elm Street. He said it was my duty to comfort him in his grief. When I refused, he took what he wanted anyway." Kestrel set down his carving and moved to sit beside her. "How long?" 2 years. Until I was old enough to leave and find work as a seamstress. But in a town like Millbrook, unmarried women without family, there aren't many options. That's why I need that teaching position so desperately, and Mayor Fitzpatrick knows this. He knows exactly what leverage he has over every woman in this town." Cordelia's voice turned bitter. "His wife pretends not to notice, and the other men look the other way because they all benefit from the same system." Kestrel was quiet for a long moment, studying the small carving in his palm. It was a bird with outstretched wings. A kestrel, she realized. "My people have a saying," he said finally. "The eagle that has been caged remembers how to fly, but it must choose to spread its wings again." "What if I'm afraid of falling?" "Then you learn to trust the wind." He pressed the small wooden bird into her palm. "And you remember that some. Winds are strong enough to carry you far from the place where you were caged." Cordelia turned the carving over in her hands, marveling at the delicate detail. "Is that what you're offering me?" "Wind? I'm offering you a choice. Stay in Millbrook and continue to be prey for men like Fitzpatrick and Hawthorne, or—" He paused, as if weighing his words carefully. "Or what?" "There are other places, Cordelia. Places where a woman's worth isn't measured by her virtue or her willingness to submit. My mother's people, the Chiricahua, they honor women as equals. They understand that strength comes in many forms." A suggestion hung in the air between them like smoke. "You're asking me to leave everything I know. I'm asking you to consider whether everything you know is worth keeping." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the forest that had sheltered them both. "But first, there is something else you should know about me." Cordelia felt her stomach tighten with familiar dread. In her experience, men's confessions rarely brought good news. "What is it?" "I am not just Apache by blood," Kestrel said quietly. "I am also the son of Colonel Marcus Whitfield of the U.S. Cavalry, the same Colonel Whitfield who ordered the attack on my mother's village." The wooden bird slipped from Cordelia's fingers, clattering to the floor. Outside, a real kestrel cried out as if in warning, its voice carrying across the awakening forest like a prophecy of storms to come. The silence stretched between them like a taut bowstring. Cordelia stared at Kestrel's back, trying to reconcile this new information with everything she thought she knew about him. The man who had held her so gently, who had listened to her darkest secret without judgment, was the son of the very soldier who had destroyed his own family. How? The word escaped her lips as barely more than breath. Kestrel turned from the window, and she saw the weight of years etched in the lines around his eyes. My mother was 17 when Colonel Whitfield's regiment wintered near her village. He was young then, barely 25, and far from the rigid officer he would become. They fell in love, or what passes for love, between a soldier and the enemy he's supposed to destroy. He moved to the fireplace, stirring the coals with unnecessary force. When spring came, his orders moved him east. He never knew about me. My mother told the tribe I was the child of a visiting warrior who died in battle. It was easier than admitting she had loved one of the blue coats. Cordelia rose slowly, her legs unsteady. But you said he killed your wife and daughter. How could he not recognize you? 28 years changes a man. And I was careful never to let him see me clearly during the attack. Kestrel's voice grew hollow. I watched from the ridge as his soldiers burned our lodges. I heard my daughter screaming for me, saw my wife trying to shield her with her own body. And I knew that somewhere in that uniformed mass of killers was the man whose blood runs in my veins. Dear God. Cordelia sank back onto the couch, overwhelmed by the cruelty of fate. Does he know now? About you? No, and he never will, if I can help it. Kestrel's hands clenched at his sides. But that's not the only reason I'm telling you this, Cordelia. There's more. She closed her eyes, bracing herself. What more could there possibly be? Colonel Whitfield retired to a small town about 50 miles east of here, a place called Millbrook. The words hit her like a physical blow. No, that's not possible. Your stepfather, Beauregard Hawthorne, he was Colonel Whitfield's second-in-command before they both left the Army. They bought property together, invested in the same businesses. They're not just neighbors, Cordelia, they're partners. She felt the world tilt beneath her, all the careful distances she'd placed between past and present collapsing like a house of cards. You're telling me that the man who raised you and the man who double quotes, she couldn't finish the sentence. The man who hurt you and the man who killed my family are bound together by more than just coincidence. Kestrel knelt before her, his hands gentle on her knees. I followed Hawthorne here 3 months ago, planning to use him to get to Whitfield, but then I saw you, and everything became complicated. She laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when you realize you're in love with the victim of your enemy? The word hung in the air between them, love. Neither had spoken it before, but now it seemed as inevitable as sunrise. Yes, Kestrel said simply. That's exactly what I call it. Cordelia looked down at his hands covering hers strong, scarred. Hands that had known violence but touched her with infinite tenderness. So, where does that leave us? Two broken people caught between revenge and redemption? It leaves us with a choice, he said. We can let the sins of our fathers destroy us, or we can choose to write our own story. And what story would that be? Kestrel smiled then, the same gentle smile that had disarmed her the night before. The story of a caged eagle and a soaring kestrel who learned to fly together. Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, dark and heavy with the promise of rain. But inside the cabin, despite everything that had been revealed, Cordelia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. There's something else you should know, she said quietly. More secrets? Just one. I think I'm falling in love with you too. The knock on the cabin door came 3 hours after dawn, sharp and authoritative. Kestrel's hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt as he motioned for Cordelia to stay back. Through the window, they could see the unmistakable blue uniform of the cavalry, Mr. Wyndham. The voice was crisp, military. This is Lieutenant Morrison. We're looking for a missing woman from Millbrook. Kestrel's jaw tightened. Wyndham was the name he used in town, a careful anglicization that kept his true identity hidden. What woman would that be, Lieutenant? Miss Cordelia Ashworth? She was. Last seen fleeing Mayor Fitzpatrick's office yesterday evening. There are concerns for her safety. Cordelia pressed herself against the wall beside the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the gap in the curtains, she could see Lieutenant Morrison flanked by 2 soldiers. What terrified her more was the 4th figure standing slightly apart from the military men, Beauregard Hawthorne, her stepfather, his pale eyes scanning the tree line with predatory patience. "I haven't seen any woman, Lieutenant," Kestrel called through the door, "but you're welcome to search the area." "That won't be necessary," Hawthorne spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the same silky menace that had haunted Cordelia's nightmares. "We have reason to believe she's taken refuge with ... local natives. You understand how dangerous that could be for a defenseless young woman." The insult was deliberate, designed to provoke. Kestrel's knuckles went white around his knife handle, but his voice remained steady. "I'm sorry I can't be of more help, gentlemen." As the search party moved away, Cordelia finally exhaled, but their relief was short-lived. 20 minutes later, smoke began rising from the direction of town. "They're burning something," Kestrel said grimly. Watching the black plume through his spyglass dot by afternoon, they had their answer. A breathless young Apache runner found them at the cabin Kestrel's cousin, Ayanna, whose name meant eternal blossom. "They burned the trading post," she gasped in rapid Apache, switching to English only when she saw Cordelia. "Said it was harboring fugitives. 3 families lost everything." Cordelia felt sick. "They're punishing innocent people because of me." "No," Kestrel said firmly. "They're showing their true nature. This has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their need to maintain control through fear." Ayanna's dark eyes were bright with anger. "There's more. They're offering a reward $50 for information leading to the woman's return. And they're threatening to search every native camp within 20 miles. $50. Cordelia sank into a chair. "That's more money than most families see in a year. Someone will betray us." "Not my people," Ayanna said proudly. "Your people shouldn't have to choose between loyalty and survival because of me," Cordelia replied. "I won't let innocent families suffer." Kestrel moved to her side. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I should go back. Face whatever consequences await me. At least then the harassment will stop." "And accomplish what?" Kestrel's voice was sharp. "Give Fitzpatrick exactly what he wants? Prove to every other woman in town that resistance is futile?" "He's right," Ayanna added quietly. "Running back to your cage won't free the other birds, cousin by choice." The endearment surprised Cordelia. In Apache culture, such titles weren't given lightly. "Then what do you suggest?" Cordelia asked. Kestrel and Ayanna exchanged a look loaded with meaning. "There is another way," he said slowly, "but it would mean leaving Millbrook forever, tonight." "The underground trail," Ayanna explained. "Escaped slaves have used it for decades, but it works just as well for anyone fleeing oppression. We have contacts who can get you safely to California, maybe Oregon Territory." "Us," Cordelia corrected quietly. "Get us to safety." Kestrel's eyes softened. "Cordelia, I can't ask you to give up your entire life for what? For love? For freedom? For the chance to build something better?" She stood, moving to the window where the smoke still darkened the sky. "My life here isn't a life, Kestrel. It's just survival. And I'm tired of merely surviving." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first fat drops of rain began to spatter against the glass. The storm was coming, in more ways than one. By midnight, the storm had intensified into a fierce tempest that lashed the forest, with sheets of rain and winds that bent the pines like grass. It was perfect weather for running. Cordelia had never imagined she could move so quietly through the darkness. Following Kestrel and Ayanna, she learned to place her feet where they placed theirs, to duck where they ducked, to become one with the shadows between the trees. Her city-raised body protested every step, But her spirit soared with each yard they put between themselves and Millbrook. They weren't alone. The underground trail, Cordelia discovered, was far more organized than she'd imagined. At predetermined stops, they met other guides, some Apache, some former slaves, some white abolitionists who risked everything to help the desperate reach freedom. Each carried different skills, different knowledge of safe houses and dangerous passages ahead. "There's a problem," whispered their current guide, an elderly Cherokee woman named Sequoia who moved through the forest like a ghost despite her 70-plus years. "Word came down the line an hour ago. They've got patrols at every river crossing for 50 miles. They huddled in the shelter of a massive fallen oak, rain drumming on the wood above their heads." Kestrel studied a hand-drawn map by the light of a shielded candle. "What about the old mine shaft route through the mountains?" Ayanna suggested. Sequoia shook her head. "Collapsed last spring. Too dangerous." "Then we go around," Kestrel said. "Add 3 days to our journey, but we don't have 3 days," Sequoia interrupted. "They've got tracking dogs now. Good ones. And they're being led by someone who knows Apache ways of traveling." Cordelia felt cold that had nothing to do with the rain soaking through her borrowed buckskins. "Who?" "A half-breed scout name of Jonas Crowkiller. Works for the cavalry when the money's good enough. He's the one who guided them to—" Sequoia's eyes flicked to Kestrel with sympathy. "To my village," Kestrel finished quietly. "Jonas has been tracking me for months." The implications settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Their pursuer wasn't just any tracker. He was someone who understood Kestrel's methods, his thinking patterns, his preferred routes. "There is one option," Sequoia said reluctantly, "but it's dangerous beyond measure. Tell us." "The Devil's Throat." Even in the dim candlelight, Cordelia could see Ayanna go pale. "Grandmother, no one has attempted that passage in 20 years. The last 3 parties that tried never came out," Sequoia finished. "But they were larger groups, traveling slower, making more noise. 2 people, traveling light, with the right skills." She looked directly at Kestrel. It could work. Kestrel was quiet for a long moment, studying the map. The Devil's Throat was marked as a narrow canyon passage through the mountains, a passens et tin mountains, a shortcut that would cut their journey by 5 days but required navigating treacherous cliffs and unstable rockfall zones. "What exactly makes it so dangerous?" Cordelia asked. "Apart from the obvious risks of falling rocks and narrow ledges?" Sequoia's weathered face was grim. "It's also sacred Apache territory. Legend says the spirits of warriors who died unavenged guard the passage. Some say it's just superstition used to keep people away from a dangerous route. Others ... Others say the spirits are real," Ayanna finished. "And they don't suffer trespassers to live." Cordelia looked at Kestrel, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his dark eyes. Behind them lay certain capture, degradation, and probably death for both of them and anyone who had helped them. Ahead lay unknown dangers, but also the possibility of genuine freedom. "How long to reach the canyon entrance?" she asked. 6 hours of hard travel," Sequoia replied. "But once you enter, there's no turning back. The passage only goes one way." "Like life," Cordelia said quietly. She reached for Kestrel's hand, feeling the calluses from years of survival, the strength that had protected her, the gentleness that had healed her wounded heart. "I say we trust the spirits to judge us fairly." Kestrel squeezed her fingers. "Then we fly through the Devil's Throat, my eagle, and we pray the wind carries us home." Dawn found them standing at the mouth of the Devil's Throat, a narrow slash in the mountain face that seemed to swallow light itself. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling, but the canyon entrance remained shrouded in shadow and mist. "The spirits are watching," Kestrel said quietly, his voice carrying a reverence Cordelia had never heard before. I can feel them. She looked at him in surprise. You believe in them? My mother taught me that belief and knowledge are different things. I don't know if the spirits are real, but I know this place has power. He touched a small medicine bundle at his throat, and I know we're about to find out what kind. They had traveled hard through the remaining hours of darkness, pushing their bodies beyond exhaustion. Behind them, the baying of tracking dogs had grown steadily closer until, about 2 hours before dawn, the sounds had stopped abruptly. Either the dogs had lost their scent in the storm, or Jonas Crowkiller had called them back, knowing where his quarry was headed. There are handholds carved into the rock, Kestrel observed, running his fingers along what looked like natural stone, old ones. This passage has been used before, despite the stories. Cordelia shouldered her pack, checking the rope that connected her to Kestrel. If one of them fell, at least they would fall together. Maybe the spirits only object to certain kinds of travelers. What do you mean? Maybe they can tell the difference between those who run toward something and those who run away from something. Kestrel smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. Spoken like a true philosopher. My mother would have liked you. Tell me about her, Cordelia said as they began their ascent. What was her name? It's a Sihu. It means eagle feather, she was. Kestrel paused, searching for words. She was fierce and gentle at the same time, like a storm that brings both destruction and rain to nourish the earth. When I was small, I thought she could command the wind itself. The path was treacherous, carved from living rock and worn smooth by centuries of weather. In places, it narrowed to barely 18 inches, with sheer drops falling away into misty depths on both sides. Cordelia focused on Kestrel's steady voice, using his stories as an anchor against vertigo and fear. She taught me that love and war could exist in the same heart, he continued, testing each foothold carefully before committing his weight. That a person could fight fiercely for what they believed in and still choose mercy over vengeance. Is that what you're choosing now? Mercy? Kestrel was quiet for several minutes, navigating a particularly difficult passage where the path curved around a blind corner. When they reached safer ground, he answered, I spent 2 years planning my revenge against Colonel Whitfield and your stepfather. I knew their routines, their weaknesses, their fears. I could have killed them both a dozen times over. What stopped you? You did. The simple statement hung in the air between them as they continued climbing. The sun was higher now, sending shafts of golden light down into the canyon, revealing the incredible beauty hidden in this supposedly cursed place. Wildflowers grew in impossible cracks in the rock, and somewhere high above, eagles circled on the warming air. Revenge would have consumed me, Kestrel said finally, made me into the very thing I hated. But loving you choosing to build something instead of destroy something. That transformed the anger into purpose. They reached a natural ledge and stopped to rest, sharing water and dried meat while looking out over the vast landscape spread below them. From this height, Millbrook was invisible, just another small scar on the earth's surface. Do you think we'll make it through? Cordelia asked. I think the spirits have already judged us, Kestrel replied, pointing upward. Following his gaze, Cordelia saw them 2 eagles circling directly overhead, their cries echoing off the canyon walls like music. As she watched, they soared higher and higher until they disappeared into the brilliant blue sky, heading west toward whatever lay beyond the mountains. They're showing us the way, she whispered. They're showing us how to fly. 6 months later, Cordelia stood on the porch of their small cabin in the Oregon Territory, watching Kestrel return from his morning hunt. The mountains here were different. From those back east, taller, wilder, touched with snow even in summer. But they were also kinder, somehow. These peaks held promises instead of threats. Any luck? She called as he approached, noting the brace of rabbits slung over his shoulder. Enough. For dinner and breakfast, he replied, his smile as warm as the day they'd first met. How did your morning go? She gestured to the papers spread across the small table they'd built together. 3 more families have written, asking about the school. Word is spreading faster than we expected. It had been Ayana's idea initially, a school for children who didn't fit the rigid molds of traditional education. Native children who wanted to learn to read and write without losing their cultural identity. Children of mixed heritage who were rejected by both communities. Girls who dreamed of more than marriage and motherhood. The Jacobson family wants to send their daughter all the way from California, Cordelia continued, excitement bright in her voice. She's 14, speaks 4 languages, and has been denied admission to every school in San Francisco because her grandmother was Miwok. Kestrel cleaned his catch with efficient movements, but she could see he was listening intently. This school was as much his dream as hers, a place where knowledge could flow freely, unbound by prejudice or tradition. We'll need to expand the cabin before winter, he said. If we're going to house students, we need proper dormitories. Already ahead of you. Cordelia held up a letter bearing an official seal. The territorial government has approved our application for land grants. 50 acres, tax-free for educational purposes. Kestrel straightened, surprise and hope warring in his expression. They approved it? Even knowing we're an unmarried Apache man and a fallen white woman running an unconventional school together. Her smile was radiant. Apparently, the frontier has less patience for old prejudices than the settled territories. They had been honest in their application, holding nothing back about their backgrounds or their relationship. It had been terrifying, laying their truth bare before officials who had every reason to reject them. But the Oregon Territory was hungry for teachers, for settlers who could bridge the gap between native and newcomer communities. There's more, Cordelia said, her voice dropping to something almost reverent. I received a letter yesterday. From Ayana, Kestrel stilled. Communication with their old life was rare and dangerous. Is she well? She's more than well. She's getting married to Lieutenant Morrison, of all people. Morrison? Kestrel's eyebrows rose. The young soldier who came looking for you. Apparently, he was asking questions in town after we disappeared. Real questions about why a woman would flee rather than face her accusers. When he learned the truth about Fitzpatrick and Hawthorne, Cordelia shook her head in amazement. He filed charges with his commanding officer. There was an investigation, and Fitzpatrick lost his position as mayor. Hawthorne was arrested for what he did to me, and apparently several other young women who finally found the courage to speak. Her voice caught slightly. They're both in prison, Kestrel. They can't hurt anyone anymore. Kestrel crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. Your courage saved more than just yourself. Our courage, she corrected. I could never have found the strength to run without you, or the wisdom to know that running towards something is different than running away. They stood together on their porch, looking out over the valley that had become home. In the distance, they could see smoke rising from the chimneys of other settlers, former slaves and displaced natives, religious refugees and political exiles. All building new lives in this place where the past mattered less than the future you were willing to create. Should we make it official? Kestrel asked quietly. The marriage, I mean. For the sake of the school, the students. Cordelia smiled up at him. Are you proposing, Mr. Wyndham? I'm asking if you'll build tomorrow with me, Miss Ashworth. Today, next year, and all the years after that. Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes, to all of it. Above them, a kestrel cried out as it soared across the endless sky.